For years now, we've heard politicians talk about the need to reform Social Security so that it will be around for future generations. Too often, however, what politicians suggest is that we privatize Social Security. That is, turn it into some form of private investment plan. But as anyone who has witnessed the volatility of the stock market in recent years can attest, such a suggestion is not simply ill-considered, it is reckless. Social Security is the single largest part of America's social safety net. It provides 39% of all income received by the elderly and more than 50% of all income for many. Without this program, America as we know it could not function. We're not simply talking about security, we are talking about sustenance and survival. Don't let the talking heads on TV fool you. Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Chase Manhattan, no bank is really too big to fail. But you know what is too big to fail? Social Security. In 2011, James N. Perturba of MIT, Stephen F. Venti of Dartmouth University, and David A. Wise of Harvard University published a paper for the National Bureau of Economic Research. Their study examined the financial conditions of people who were aged 65 to 69 in 2008. What makes this paper unique is that it evaluated Social Security and defined benefit pensions, things that give us income rights, not actual wealth, as though they were wealth. That way, they can be compared to real wealth that most research examines, to things like retirement plan savings, taxable savings, and home equity. The study then showed the distribution of these assets for each decile, that is, for each 10% of the population, from the wealthiest 10% to the poorest 10%. The results were eye-opening. For most Americans, most wealth is virtual, not real. Social Security wealth, that is, the rights to income that we build through working, is the only form of wealth and sustenance that many Americans have when they retire. For 90% of households, the virtual wealth of Social Security dominates the real wealth in financial assets, often by large multiples. For the fifth decile, that is, the 10% of the population in the middle, Social Security wealth is 6 times greater than their financial assets. Only the top 10% of all households had more financial assets than they had in virtual Social Security wealth. But even among the top 10%, the $643,100 in their Social Security wealth was only slightly behind their $711,000 in financial assets. Let's face it, the wealth and sustenance of all Americans is a lot thinner than we like to think. We can talk about pensions all day long, but the fact is, in the study that I have been referencing, pension wealth registered at 0 for the bottom 70% of all single-person households and 0 for 60% of all married households. And since pension plans have been in decline for decades, we can expect that this already thin source of sustenance will become even thinner in the future. Thus, Social Security is an indispensable safety net for the American Republic, and we must never allow politicians of either party to put it at risk by privatizing it. Let's face it, such a move is simply a means of propping up the stock market artificially. That is, it would just be another transfer of wealth from working people to multinational corporations. Just like when we bailed out the large banks in 2008 and 2009. Now people will say, okay Crow, if you don't want to privatize Social Security, then how are you going to keep it functioning? Are you going to resort to means testing? There are a number of Democrats and Republicans who favor this approach, but I'm not one of them. Why? Well, to begin with, when Social Security was created, one of the fundamental promises was that benefits would never be taxed. And I don't know about you, but I'm tired of being lied to by the government. Nevertheless, in 1984, Congress voted to begin taxing Social Security. Few retirees protested in 1984 because only 3% of retirees were expected to pay any taxes back then. But like all new taxes, the devil is in the detail. You see, the formula for the taxation of benefits is not indexed for inflation. So it acts as a stealth tax, rising as the dollar loses its value. While only 3% of retirees were expected to pay any taxes back then, inflation has caused more than 30% of retirees to pay higher taxes today. And while both parties proclaim their desire to protect the middle class, the reality is different. The taxation of Social Security benefits is entirely a tax on middle class people who happen to be retirees. Efforts to repeal the tax have been defeated year after year. And in fact, the tax was increased during the Clinton administration. Scott Burns of Asset Builder recently provided an excellent example of how this tax is one exclusively levied against the middle class. According to the Social Security website, the average benefits received by a retired worker and his non-working spouse now total $23,343 a year. At an income of $18,000 a year, with or without the addition of $23,343 in Social Security benefits, a couple pays no taxes. Increase other income to $24,000 a year for a couple, and their tax bill would be only $86. But when Social Security benefits are added, the bill rises to $343. It's a big increase, but it's still a small amount. Add another $6,000, so the income is $36,000, and the couple's bill would be $1,387. When Social Security benefits are added, the bill rises to $2,561, an increase of 85%. If other income increases another $6,000, so that their income is $42,000 a year, then their tax bill would be $2,088. But including Social Security, it would increase to $4,256, an increase of 104%. Add still another $6,000 so that their income is $48,000 a year, and the couple's tax bill without Social Security benefits would be $3,004. But when benefits are added, it goes up to $5,951, a 98% increase. Finally, if we add yet another $6,000, making the couple's other income $54,000, then their tax bill, excluding Social Security benefits, would be $3,920. It would rise by $3,023 to $6,943 when benefits are considered, an increase of 77%. The increase is smaller for this amount because all the Social Security benefits that can be taxed have been taxed. What is important here is the total income being considered. We are talking about a cash income range from $41,343 to $77,343. We are not talking about fat cats or the 1%. What we have here is Democrats and Republicans joining forces to nearly double the tax burden of middle-class retirees who spent their lives playing by the rules. So when you hear my competitors talking about entitlement reform, what they're really talking about is changing the formula for future benefits or coming up with underhanded ways to reduce or further means test benefits. According to the most recent trustees report, the tax on Social Security benefits now provides only 3.2% of the total revenue. It will rise to 4.8% by 2022. So the tax is a small benefit for Social Security, but a big burden for retirees. The fact remains, the fastest way to improve the income and security of middle-class retirees would be to eliminate this stealth tax. And this is exactly what I propose to do once I'm in the Senate. Now my competitors will say, Crow, where are you going to get the money for all of this? If we can find the money to bail out large multinational banks, then we can find the money to save Social Security. All of my competitors talk about being budget hawks, how if you vote for them, they will trim the fat from the U.S. budget. One of the success stories that conservatives like to tout recently is the deep cuts that they were able to make in the Farm Bill. But the fact remains that even if Congress would have achieved the deepest cuts that anyone was proposing in the Farm Bill, it is estimated that it would have saved U.S. taxpayers $40 billion over the next 10 years. The truth is, the final version of this bill will save taxpayers far less. Now, at the same time that Congress was debating the Farm Bill, that at most would have saved $40 billion over the next 10 years, the Federal Reserve was undertaking a bond buying policy to the tune of $85 billion a month. This, of course, is still the payment that we are making for the fallout from the financial crisis of 2008, which, by the way, you and your children and your grandchildren will still be paying for generations. Understanding of this financial disaster and wishing to prevent a similar one in the future, in 2008, Congress temporarily wised up and sought to force banks to put most of their risky trades outside the bank into separately capitalized subsidiaries, where losses would not be guaranteed by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. The problem is, last October 30th, a bill passed the House with the support of James Lankford that would allow the banks to trade almost all complex derivatives without quarantining them in a separate affiliate. Ultimately, this is likely to set us up for another financial crisis on par or greater than the one in 2008, and something that is likely to be far more costly than keeping Social Security solvent. It's all about setting priorities. Theirs is creating a financial system that rewards misconduct. Mine is about keeping Social Security solvent. So how do I propose to pay for this? Simple. Lift the cap. As you know, for most of us, the Social Security tax is set at 6.2%. Now that doesn't matter whether you make $20,000 a year, $40,000 a year, $60,000 a year, or $100,000 a year. But guess what? The tax is capped at $113,700 a year. So while I, who make between $50,000 and $60,000 a year, pay a Social Security tax of 6.2%, a person who makes $400,000 a year pays a Social Security tax of 1.75%. Or to put it another way, the average salary of an acute care nurse practitioner in a cardiac ICU in Chicago, Illinois is $113,000 a year. That is, she would make the limit of what can be taxed. Therefore, this nurse practitioner would pay a Social Security tax of roughly $7,000 a year. Bill Gates' net worth last year was estimated to be $76 billion. So how much was his personal Social Security tax last year? You guessed it, the maximum would be $7,000 a year. Because again, the tax is capped on wages over $113,000. My call to lift the cap on Social Security is not designed to play on class animosities. There is a saying falsely attributed to Abraham Lincoln that one cannot help the poor by tearing down the rich. And the fact is, most wealthy people that I know came by their wealth through hard work and honest means. And let me be clear about this. I am not asking the wealthy to pay a higher rate of Social Security tax than others. I recognize that entrepreneurs are one of the greatest sources of job creation in our country. In fact, other popular plans designed to ensure the survival of Social Security would truly punish entrepreneurs. For example, if we were to increase employer contributions to Social Security, this would pass the cost of Social Security on to business owners and stockholders much more than lifting the cap on Social Security would. My call for lifting the cap on Social Security is meant to shield true entrepreneurs, not punish them. Also, before we lift the cap, or at least in conjunction with it, we must prevent Social Security revenue from being eaten up by the general budget. That is, Social Security taxes must not be used to finance anything other than Social Security. In addition, we must redouble our efforts to weed out Social Security fraud. But don't be mistaken, eliminating fraud and ensuring that Social Security revenue is not used to finance items other than Social Security may not be enough to make the system solvent. If it is, great, don't lift the cap. By the way, lifting the cap doesn't mean that we have to eliminate the cap. It just means lifting the cap long enough and high enough to offset any shortfalls. Unlike those on the left, I don't believe in increasing revenue just for the sake of growing government or punishing the wealthy. But for far too long in this country, the right have followed the same bad habit that the left has. That is, they want to eat their cake and have it too, and not just that, they don't even want to pay for the cake. For as long as I can remember, Republicans and Democrats alike have kicked the problem of financing Social Security down the road. It's time that we face reality. Unlike Obamacare and other failed programs, Social Security is a contract with the American people. That is, American workers have paid into the program all their working life, and so they should expect for Social Security to be there when they retire. I have demonstrated Social Security is the one essential safety net of the American Republic. Americans should expect 4 things from their government. First, that it protect our borders. If we can't do that, then what is the purpose of having national boundaries? Second, that it protects American citizens from foreign threats. That's the real purpose of the military. Not defending other people's liberty, and certainly not picking the winner in some shadowy civil war. Third, that it defends the liberties of American citizens as defined by our Bill of Rights. And fourth, that it fulfill its promise that the money that citizens have paid into Social Security all of their working lives will be there when they retire. I have outlined my plan on how to fulfill the government's obligations concerning Social Security. I now challenge my opponents to outline their plans concerning this important subject, because come June the 24th, we're not having a coronation, we're having an election. And therefore, I call on the other candidates in this election to stop acting like this is a monarchy and start acting like true Republicans.